Hello and welcome to Bite My Pie. Have you ever wondered what all the fuss is about with Chromebooks? Well, in today's video we're going to take a Windows PC and effectively convert it into one. Why on earth would anyone want to do such a crazy thing, you might ask? Well, one good reason could be that the version of Windows that's running on your computer might be out of date and no longer supported, like Windows 7 for example, and the computer is just too old to update to Windows 10. So don't just bin it, recycle instead. Breathing new life into an old laptop would be an excellent use case for the software that we're going to look at in this video. So precisely how do you go about achieving this? We'll be using the aptly named Cloudready, as the home version is completely free, and it's one of the easiest ways to convert a lethargic computer into a speedy Chrome device. So if you fancy learning how to do this, stick around. Cloudready is based on Chromium OS, which is the open source operating system that Google's Chrome OS is also based on. Each of these operating systems is built around the web browser, so in the case of Chromium OS and Cloudready, that's the Chromium web browser, or with Google's Chrome OS, it's Google's Chrome web browser. So each of these operating systems shares a lot of things in common, and being based around the web browser, they're all effectively cloud-centric operating systems. What that means in practice is that you basically store your documents in Google's cloud. In the early days of Chrome OS, that was about all you could do, but as the operating systems have evolved, you now do have more options and you can increasingly have access to your folders and files offline as well. When the Chromium Chrome operating system was first introduced, it was little more than a web browser, and at the time the features were quite limited. Fortunately, time has moved on, and although the likes of Cloudready is still not completely comparable to something like Microsoft Windows in terms of its full functionality, you can now achieve a lot more than you might imagine, as you'll see throughout the course of this video. So with that brief introduction out of the way, let's dig in. Okay, so first things first, let's fire up a web browser, and we're going to go to Google and search for Cloudready, and it's this one here, Cloudready Home Edition by Neverware. So if you click on there, and if we look on the home page, we've got this Install the Home Edition button. So if we click that, that takes us further down the page to the Installing Cloudready section, which talks a bit more about the installation. And then you've got this Build Your Cloudready installer, which has got the Download the USB Maker. And again, we've got another orange button here saying Download USB Maker, which is the tool we're going to use to set up our USB stick ready for installing Cloudready. So if you click on that now, and we'll let it save to our downloads directory and click save. And when that's finished, you can close your web browser. So if we open File Explorer and go to our downloads directory, you can see we've got the Cloudready USB Maker. So if we double click on that and begin the installation process, say yes to that, and here we go. Right, first things first, let's insert a USB memory stick into our PC to put the Cloudready installer onto. So as it says on the screen, you need an 8 or 16 gigabyte USB stick. You can actually go larger than that if you want, but so long as it's at least 8 gig, you'll be fine. As it also tells us, it's going to take about 20 minutes for this USB installer creation. So once your USB stick is plugged into your computer, you can click Next to proceed. Okay, so you can see on this screen it's not recommending SanDisk devices. I'm actually using a Kingston for this video, which are a pretty decent brand. So when you're happy to continue, click next. And it's automatically detected my USB stick, so I can select that and click next again. And it's now going to go out and download the installer image for us. So I'll pause the video and come back when this part is complete. Right, the installer image is now downloaded, and it's actually a compressed image, so it's extracting it for us automatically. And now that it's extracted the image, it's creating our Cloudready USB installer, so it's copying the files onto our USB stick ready for the installation. And as it tells us there, this process may take up to 20 minutes, so now would be an excellent time to grab yourself a coffee. And I'm going to pause the video and rejoin you shortly. And that's it, our Cloudready USB stick is created. So we can click Finish and close File Explorer. Now if this is the computer that you're planning on installing Cloudready onto, you'll want to make sure that you've got everything backed up off of it first, because when you install Cloudready it will completely wipe the hard drive and replace it with the new operating system. If it's another computer you're going to install it onto, you'll want to remove the USB stick now and put it into the other machine ready. For the purposes of this video, I'm actually going to install Cloudready over the top of the Windows installation on this computer, so I can leave the USB stick in the port on the computer. And what we're going to do now is boot the computer that you want to install Cloudready onto from the USB stick. So if I shut down this PC, we can do that now. Okay, so make sure your USB stick is plugged into the computer you want to install Cloudready onto, and then power on the machine. And as you do so, you need to keep tapping a key on the keyboard to enter that computer's BIOS. In my case, as I've just done here, that's the delete key, but you may need to look up what the correct key is for your computer. If you just do a Google search of your computer model and followed by the word BIOS or UEFI, that should get you the information you need. Now some computers will let you access their boot menu without going into the BIOS, and if that's the case, that's great. Just access your boot menu and select it to boot from the USB stick. If not, once you've entered the BIOS, we're actually looking for the boot section, and in this case that would be here, and you can come down and select your boot order. So I could enter into this and choose my Kingston Data Traveller USB key here and select it there to be the first boot device. I'm not actually going to do that. I'll put it back to the hard disk as the first boot device, because we only want to do this process once. Once we've installed Cloudready, we'll want it to boot again from the computer hard disk rather than the USB stick. So instead, if there's an option like there is here on my Save and Exit tab, it might be in your boot section on your BIOS, just have a look. There's usually an option to boot override. And what this allows us to do is just select the USB stick to boot from on this one occasion. So if I use the cursor keys to select the Kingston Data Traveller entry for me, so you select your USB stick, whatever that is. Some of the more modern BIOS setups, or UEFI as they're now known, will even allow you to use your mouse to point and click your way around, but if not, then like me, just use your keyboard. And when you've got the entry highlighted, just press enter to boot from it. So Cloudready is going to start up, as we can see on the screen, and it will bring us to this welcome screen initially. And one of the great things about Cloudready is that, like Linux, it will let us try it out, test and play around with it without even installing it onto our hard drive. Probably not that surprising really, because underneath the skin this is built on top of the Linux kernel, and Linux distros have had this live booting feature for years. Right, so let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is, if the English United States isn't the correct option for you, as it's not for me, you can click on there and come into the choose your language and keyboard section, and from the drop down list I'm going to change that to United Kingdom English, and for the keyboard I'm going to change that from US to the UK, so choose the settings to suit you and click OK. And when you've done that, you can click on the Let's Go button. The next thing it wants us to do is to connect to a network, and as you can see on the screen, I'm already connected because I've got an Ethernet cable plugged in to the computer. If you haven't, you could join it to your wireless network by selecting your network from the list and then obviously entering your secure passphrase to connect to your Wi-Fi. With this being a cloud-based operating system, this step is even more important than it would be on a traditional operating system. So connect to your network and then click Next. This step is optional, so you can either leave it checked as default to send anonymous data to Cloudready, or if you'd rather not do that, then you can click on here to deselect the tick so it's not going to send any data, anonymous or otherwise, and then click continue. So we're now ready to sign into our new Chromebook. Now obviously you're going to need a Google account for this because Chromebooks are effectively tied to your Google account. So if you don't already have one, let's have a quick look at how you set one up. So if you come down to more options and click that, you've got the option here to create an account. So if we select that, you can go through the wizard and fill in the details it asks for and set up your new Google account. If you've already got one, or once you've done that, if I just go back, we need to enter our Google account email into this box here. And when you've entered that, you can click Next. And now you need to enter your password. And again, you can click Next to proceed and to log us in. And here we are at the Cloudready desktop. So we've got the welcome screen there, which we can just close out of that. And then we've got another welcome message, and we've even got the option to take a tour, which might not be a bad idea on your first outing, just to work through and see how things work. But I'm going to take you through the interface now anyway, so don't worry too much about that. Now bear in mind at this point we are still running off the USB stick, we haven't actually installed Cloudready onto our computer. I'll come to how we do that shortly, but let's first take a look round. So if we start down at the bottom left, which if we're in Windows that would be your start menu, in Chrome OS they call this the launcher or app launcher. So if we click on there, this gives us access to our applications. So you can see along the bottom here we've got Chromium, the open source browser that Google Chrome is based upon. We've got a Files app, we've got access to the device's camera, we've got settings, and we've got the web store. We've also got a big search box here that we could search for anything on the device, the apps, or even on the web from this search box. If we click the up arrow here, it enlarges the screen, and then you can see the apps that we've actually got on the device, which at the moment it's pretty sparse, but over time we can populate this with more apps. On the right hand side you've got these little dots. If I was to click the next one, that will show us the other apps that are currently on the device, or on our memory stick as the case is at the moment. So let's click in this space just here to minimize that back down, and if we come back in, let's quickly go through each one. So obviously if we click on Chromium, That's your web browser, which is pretty self-explanatory. So if I close out of that, come next along and click on Files. So this is a little bit like File Explorer in Microsoft Windows, but because Chrome OS, or Cloudready in this case, is a cloud-based operating system, you can see here we've got access to Google Drive, and because we've signed in with our Google account, any documents we put in here will be available on any device that we connect to using our Google Drive. So you can think of the Google Drive as your own personal hard drive stored in the cloud on Google's servers. I believe you currently get 15 gigabytes of storage space for free with your account, but obviously you can pay for extra storage if you require it. Now, a neat feature of Google Drive is that anybody else that's using it could share documents with you, and then in this shared with me section they would show up here. Also, as Chrome OS has improved over the years, you now have the facility to make your documents available offline, so should you lose your internet connection, you would still be able to access those documents on your Chromebook. Alternatively, because this is Cloudready's implementation of Chrome OS, it gives us access to any internal hard drives on our computers, like this one here. And then at the top here we've got downloads, so naturally that's where any of the files that you've downloaded from the internet are going to be found. Right, let's come out of the Files app and go back to the launcher, and we've got camera. So obviously if your device has got a camera, mine hasn't that I'm demonstrating on, but if it did have, you'd be able to view that here. Having a camera, for example if you're putting Cloudready onto a laptop, could be very useful for things like video calling. Okay, come out of that, and then we've got our settings. So if we just make that a bit bigger, so as you can see on the screen there's a lot of settings here to cover all sorts of things. I'm not going to go into detail of each of these, other than to say that you can think of this settings area as being like the control panel in Windows. Right, let's come out of that, and if we go back to the launcher, and last along here we've got the web store. Now the web store is very useful because in Chrome OS this is where we carry out all of our installations and add additional functionality to the operating system. So on the left we've got extensions highlighted by default, and these are Chrome extensions because Chrome OS, as the name suggests, started effectively as the Chrome browser. In the early days it literally was that the operating system was the Chrome browser. It didn't really do much else other than browse the web through Chrome. As time has gone by, more and more functionality has been added to the operating system, but these extensions are just as in the Chrome web browser. You could go to exactly the same extensions and add additional functionality to the browser. This is where you would do it here within Cloudready. So feel free to scroll down the page and have a look at some of the extensions that are available. The editor's picks are usually quite good. If you find an extension that you like, say Google Translate for example, if you click on it, that will tell you even more about the extension and what it does, and you can even check out reviews from other people. And then if you still think you'd like to try it out yourself, just click the Add to Chrome button up here, and then it's basically telling us that what permissions that the extension needs. So in this case it can read and change all the data on the websites that you visit. So if you're happy to allow that, then click the Add Extension button, and you can see it's going to download and install that for us and add it to Chrome. And we've now got this little icon that's been added up here on the top right for Google Translate. Likewise, you've got the option to remove from Chrome if you didn't want it anymore, or let's say further down the line, when I've left this page, I decide I don't want it anymore, up here where the little icon is for Google Translate, if I right click on it, I've got the option to remove it from Chromium, and then click remove, and that's it, it's gone. Okay, next up in the Chrome store down the list, we've got themes. So you've got all sorts of options in here to change the appearance of how Chrome looks. So let's say you really like dark themes, you've got this just black one here. We can click that. Again, if we add to Chrome, and that's it, it's added, and you can see straight away that the top of the Chromium browser has gone black. I don't particularly want that, so I'm going to undo that. Okay, let's go back to the Chrome web store. So that was themes. Next down the list is a really good one, so this is apps. So you can think of these as the actual software that's available for Chrome OS. You'll quickly see there's all sorts of things available, and in fact if we look on the list here, you can actually make life a little bit simpler by filtering by your requirement. So if you want apps that only run offline, you would check this box here, or apps that are actually developed only by Google, you would check there. Apps that are purely free here. More and more Chromebooks running Google's Chrome OS now have the functionality to go to the Play Store and download and install Android apps on the Chromebook. Unfortunately, that's not what this is here. This is just the web store's version of software that's available for Android. Cloudready doesn't support either the Play Store or Android apps, so if you'd like access to those, you'd either need to purchase an Android device or an official Chromebook, and then here you've got the option to filter the apps by those that work with Google Drive. Okay, so let's have a go at installing an app onto our Cloudready system. So I'm going to go with the Polar photo editor. So if we come into the search, the store box at the top left, and type Polar, and we can see in the list we've got the Polar photo editor, and if we look under the apps, there it is, Polar photo editor. So if we click on that and then click add to Chrome and add the app, it's going to go out and download it for us, and after the download's complete it installs it for us, and there you go, it's installed. Okay, so if we minimize Chromium, come back to the launcher menu and expand it, you can now see we've got an added entry for the Polar photo editor. So if I click on that, it launches the app and we get a button to get started, and we can skip the introduction, and there we go, we're in the photo editor. So let's close that. Now if we later decided we didn't want the app anymore, if we come back to our launcher and expand it, we can right click on it and we have the option to uninstall and remove, and that's it, it's gone. So if I reopen Chromium by clicking on the icon in the center here, and that takes us back into where we were last on the web store. So if we come back to the web store homepage, and that's your apps, and then the last category we've got is games. So again, there's a whole raft of various titles of games that you can while away the hours playing in here once you've installed them. So that's the Chrome web store. We can come out of that now. Now you may have noticed if we click on the launcher again, these quick shortcuts do change as to the ones that you've been using most recently, and here on the left you can see we've just come out of the web store. So that's the launcher. We've already seen Chromium is listed in the center here. Now this bar along the bottom, which in Windows would be your taskbar, is known as the shelf in Chrome OS, and you can actually add additional icons to it. So how do we do that? Well, if you click back on the launcher and expand it, let's say we wanted to pin our Files app on the shelf as well. If you right click on it, you get this menu, and obviously the one we want is pin to shelf. If I left click that, and now as you can see it's added it to the shelf for us. So if I minimize or come back out of the launcher, we've now got Chromium and the Files app on our shelf. Now, just as we would in Windows, if we right click on the desktop, we've got a context menu, and you've got options here for one for auto hiding the shelf. You've got another one for the position of the shelf, which by default is along the bottom, but you can change that if you would prefer. And then we've got this option here for setting the wallpaper. So obviously at the moment we've just got this default picture of a city, but if you click through the various categories here on the left, you've got a whole assortment of different images that you could put on your backdrop. So let's change that to something else just by selecting it, and we can come out of that. And that really just leaves us with this area down here at the bottom right of the shelf with the time on it. So you can see next to that I've got a little number 1 with in a circle. That just means I've got a notification there waiting for me. So if I click on this area, we get this whole extra menu, and you can see at the top the notification, which is just telling me that we installed the Polar Photo Editor successfully. So I can close that with the cross just to dismiss the notification. So along the top of this menu here we've got options for signing out of our account. We can, next to that, shut down the Cloudready operating system to turn off our computer. We can lock it to lock the screen if we haven't finished using it but we want to leave it securely so that nobody else can access it. We can get to the settings that we looked at earlier from here as well. This drop down arrow will just shrink the menu a little bit. Let's bring it back up so we can look at the options. Here is the option to install the operating system onto our internal hard drive, which is what we're going to do in a moment. Next along we've got the network options. Then we can toggle Bluetooth on or off. We can set our notifications, so at the moment notifications are turned on for all apps, but if I was to click that I can choose what I want notifications for, or I can toggle this switch here at the top if I don't want to be disturbed at all. We've got a nice feature of a night light, so if you use your device a lot in the evenings, toggling this on will actually remove a lot of the harsh blue light that is said to make it difficult to sleep at night. So let's turn that off again because it's not actually night time at the moment. Then we've got a slider that allows us to adjust our volume, and there's a little audio settings button here that allows us to see our input and output devices. And then at the bottom we've got this brightness slider, so again we can toggle the brightness level. And then lastly, right at the bottom, it tells us what today's date is. Right, so hopefully you're starting to feel comfortable around the Cloudready interface, but remember we're still running this off the USB stick at the moment. While this is great for testing the operating system and trying it out first, it's got a couple of drawbacks. It's not going to be as fast as it will be once you install it on your computer's hard drive, and also being a memory stick, the storage capacity is going to be significantly less. Hopefully you've now decided that you would like to install Cloudready onto your computer, so that being the case, let's do that now. If we click the clock at the bottom right of the shelf to bring the menu back up, we've got the Install OS option here, so if we click on that to begin the installation of the Cloudready operating system. Now it gives us this nice warning that we're about to install it onto our computer hard drive, and that it will overwrite all of the data on that hard drive, so make sure that you've got it backed up if you don't want to lose it. And when you're happy to continue, click on Install Cloudready. And then just for good measure we get another warning to tell us that it is definitely going to erase your entire hard drive. So you can't say that you haven't been warned, and Since we're happy to do that and continue, we can click on this option here, erase hard drive, and install Cloudready. So let's do that now. And there we go, we're off to the races. It's installing the operating system onto our computer. And if you read the message there on screen, it tells us that the not only to not turn off the machine, but also that the install should take no longer than 20 minutes. So that being the case, it's another good chance to grab a cup of coffee. I'll pause the video at this point and we'll come back once it's completed. Okay, once it's finished the installation, you'll most likely find that it's shut down your computer for you. So you can remove your memory stick, your USB stick, from the computer at this point, as I'm doing now, and then just press the power button to fire it back up. Right, so the computer is now booting, so fingers crossed. And here we go, so the USB stick is out of the port, so this is booting from the internal drive. And there we go, we've got the welcome screen ready to set things up. You might be wondering why we're seeing the welcome setup screen again when we already set things up on the memory stick, and that's because we're actually now running it for the first time from the computer hard drive. So obviously we need to complete the installation and get things up and running as we want them on the computer itself. So we just need to run through the setup again quickly. So if you select your language from the drop down list and select your keyboard type and hit let's go, choose the network you want and click next, and then either agree or not to send anonymous data to Cloudready and click continue, and that's it, you're ready to sign into your new Chromebook. So let's enter our Google account, email address and the password, and click next or hit enter again. And that's it, we're properly installed now and logged into our Cloudready desktop, so feel free to take the tour again if you wish. And that's just a thank you for using Cloudready from the Cloudready developers. So we can close that. Well, that's it in terms of the installation. You've now got Cloudready running on your computer. So if you were to bring up the menu and do a shutdown, and now when you power the computer back on, it's going to boot straight into Cloudready. So we get the logon screen this time, so if I was to put my password in there it would log me straight back to the desktop, or alternatively I can shut the computer down from here. I can browse as a guest, which if I click that one, that's a nice option, because if you wanted to lend your computer to someone, they can use it and use the internet without even having an account and browse as a guest, and then when they're finished they can just come to the menu and exit the guest account or shut it down. And so again, from the login screen we can even add an additional person, so if there's somebody else got another Google account that they want to use on the Chromebook, you can add that into here so that they can log in properly as well. So let's go back and I'll log in to my account, back to the Cloudready desktop. You can see that even now a large part of Chrome OS still revolves around the Chrome, or in this case Chromium, browser. But we do have some nice additional features these days that didn't used to exist in the operating system. I already mentioned the possible use of Android apps if you've got an official Chromebook. But even through our Cloudready installation and implementation of Chrome OS, there's still some useful additional features that I'll take a quick look at now. If we look back on the launcher menu and expand that and come down to the next screen, You may have noticed already we've got VirtualBox here, so if I was to click on that, we've got the option to install VirtualBox. Now if you're not sure what VirtualBox or indeed virtual machines are, then feel free to check out my video on the very subject. How useful this feature would actually be within Cloudready would very much be dependent on your hardware. If you're running this on an older machine, which as I said earlier would be an ideal use case for it, you're probably not going to get too much use out of VirtualBox. But if you've got it on more powerful hardware, then the sky is pretty much the limit, because you could install whatever other operating system within here that you wanted. So for example, you could run the latest version of Windows 10 inside of VirtualBox on your Cloudready computer. I'm not going to go through that here in this video, but as I say, please check out my other video regarding VirtualBox if that sounds as though it may be of any use to you. Another interesting feature to point out, if we look within the settings of Cloudready, and on the left here we've got Linux beta, so be aware that this feature is still in beta. So for the adventurous, we could click this turn on button here, so I'll do that now, and as it says, it's going to set up Linux beta on your Chrome device. So let's click the install button to download that. I'll just pause the video for a moment while it grabs it. So once installed, that launches into a terminal like the one that's on the screen now. So this definitely isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you fancy it, obviously this gives us a lot more functionality. Now, just because that is a terminal doesn't mean I can't use that to add some additional software that is actually usable through the graphical user interface. So let's do a simple example. We'll start as you should whenever you do anything in the Linux terminal with regards to installing software. We'll update the repositories, that's where it's going to pull the software in from. So we'll do the command sudo apt update and press enter, and it goes out and checks that the repositories are all up to date. And now that they're up to date, we need to make sure that all the packages on our actual system are updated. So we do that with sudo apt upgrade and press enter again. So you can see that we're all good and everything is up to date, but if a list was waiting, you would usually just type the Y key on your keyboard to accept that you wanted to carry out the update and then press enter. And now we're actually going to install the package itself. So I'm going to go with gedit, which is just a little text editor, a bit like Notepad in Windows, but this is the Linux version. So I'm going to go sudo apt install gedit and press enter. And there you go, you can see it's going to pull all these packages in to install the gedit. They're the dependencies, so it will work. So as it says, do you want to continue? So we're going to type Y on the keyboard for yes and press enter to carry out the installation. And we get a nice bar across the screen now, which gives us our progress. And as you can see, that's going to take a moment or two, so I'll pause the video and return once the process is complete. Right, so that's installed, so we can either close the terminal with a cross at the top right, or we can type the word exit and press enter. And we can also close the settings screen, and if we click the launcher and expand it, we can now see we've got this Linux apps section. So if we go in there, you've got the terminal, which is what we were just in, so that's how you'd relaunch it if you wanted to get back there. You've got a help section, and more importantly, we've got the gedit text editor that we just installed. So if I click on that, you can see at the bottom that it's opening it, and there we go, we've now got a Linux text editor on our Cloudready operating system. Now that's a pretty basic example, but hopefully it shows you how without too much effort you can potentially install a lot of extra Linux based software onto your Cloudready computer. So let's close out of there. Now again, using Linux software on top of Chrome OS is going to require a little bit more horsepower in terms of your hardware requirements, but hopefully most computers should be able to cope so long as you don't expect too much. When using Chromium OS, Chrome OS or Cloudready, you can take advantage of some of Google's productivity tools. You may already be using Gmail for your email, and we've already mentioned earlier in the video Google Drive, but on the screen are a few more useful additions. These are Google's equivalents to Microsoft's offerings, and even offer a limited level of compatibility with files created in their MS Office counterparts. So as you can see, for Microsoft Word we've got in the Google ecosystem Google's Docs, which is available through your browser by visiting docs.google.com. And then for Microsoft Excel we've got Google Sheets, which is likewise available at sheets.google.com. And then finally we've got the Google version of PowerPoint for your presentations, which is Google Slides, and that's available at slides.google.com. Effectively being the Google version of Microsoft Office, these help form the core of Google's own G Suite for Business and are free for personal use. And the last thing I want to look at before we finish is, now that Chrome OS or Cloudready is installed onto our computer, if we just look back in the Files app, you'll notice that the internal hard drive has now disappeared from the list, and that's because we've installed Cloudready onto it. So effectively the My Files are now sitting on the internal hard drive, so anything you download into your downloads directory will be on that internal hard drive now. You'll also notice it's created this Linux files section for us. That's because we turned on and installed the Linux system from within the settings. But more importantly, as well as still having our Google Drive access, because we have effectively now got an internal hard drive with the storage that entails, if we click on the My Files and then right click on it and, for example, create a new folder, we can actually set up folders in here. So obviously we've got a new folder there. If I right click on it and go and rename, I can give it any name that I want. So let's say I wanted to start storing my music on here. I could call that music and press enter, and now I've got a local directory on my computer, just as I would do in Windows, for example, that I could put my music into. So again, coming back to My Files, if I right click on that, I could do another new folder and again rename it, and I could call this one Documents. So I could actually build up all of the folders I want to store my local files within Cloudready. So if I close out of that and come to the menu and power off, that about brings us to the end. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to Cloudready. While it's not an exact copy of Chrome OS, it's as near as you're going to get without actually purchasing a Chromebook. More to the point, if you didn't previously know what Chrome OS actually entailed, hopefully this has given you an insight into what that is, and as to whether you may wish to consider purchasing a branded Chromebook. Or, as mentioned earlier, you might just use it as an excellent way of repurposing an old desktop or laptop computer. At the very least, it should make you aware that there are other computer operating systems out there that are well worth your attention, rather than simply sticking with the more mainstream Windows or macOS options. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you may have potentially salvaged some of your older hardware that could have otherwise ended up in the great tech graveyard in the sky. As always, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified when I post the next video, just click the bell icon. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.